This meeting is being recorded.
And I'm calling the meeting to order, and I want to thank Raed Jarrar from Dawn for joining us to talk about the possibilities of a Saudi Arabian-U.S. deal. In a minute, I'll turn the floor over to Tony Litwinko, who will introduce Raed. But first, let me just point out what's coming up. I can't find it, just a second. So I've quickly changed, Yossi and I got together and changed the schedule. If you might remember, Yossi was scheduled for January, but because of the serious situation, we have Hussam Alayoush, who's the executive director of CARE, who is a Syrian. Hussam and I walked picket lines against Assad years ago. Mm-hmm. And he's going to join us in 4 weeks on January 20th to try to help us understand what's going on in Syria. Yossi then will follow in February with the explaining lessons about peacemaking from Northern Ireland, which was a 5-day workshop that the Abraham Initiative put on in Northern Ireland with experts on the ground to try to learn lessons. And then in March, we have Jeff Halper giving his case for one state. And right now we're open in April and onward. So with that, I am going to turn the floor over to, I'm going to get rid of this heading, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Tony, who will introduce Raed. And I'm making Raed a co-host so he can do what he has to do.
Good. Okay. Raed, I don't know if you remember me or recognize me, but I'm pretty sure that we met back around 2007 when I got involved in a educational program for teachers here in Los Angeles about learning about Islam in the Middle East. And you—
That's right, and we exchanged emails for a while.
Yeah, you were part of the American Friends Service Committee at that point. And I think you came to town for a visit, and maybe stayed for a week or so. Wafat Shami was head of the program, and I noticed that from your Facebook that you're friends with people like Karen Pally and who else? Who was the head of AFSC at that time? I can't remember her name.
I think Joyce Ajlouni.
Yeah, and also Jordan O'Grobley, Teresa, who I saw last night, believe it or not, at All Saints. And I told her that I was going to be introducing you, and she said to say hi. So
please say hi to her too.
Yeah. So at any rate, I did meet Raed back then, and he told stories about having grown up in Iraq at the beginning of the wars and paying attention to all the human rights violations that were going on. He came to the United States in 2005 and worked as a consultant and a political advocate, testified before Congress about various different matters about Iraq, worked for the American Friends Service Committee, spent some time also working for American Muslims for Palestine, Amnesty International. He was born in Iraq. He was the son of a Palestinian man who fled with his family in 1967. And grew up in Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Iraq, got his bachelor's degree in architecture and from the University of Baghdad, and master's degree in architecture from the University of Jordan. So he's got some really good structural things to talk about. And I seem to recall that your thesis for your master's degree was about reconstructing damaged
that's right.
property from war.
Post-war reconstruction.
So at any rate, he came to the United States and he has worked for a number of different organizations. He currently works for Democracy for the Arab World, Mideast, and North Africa, Dawn MENA, which was founded in 2018 by Jamal Khashoggi, the Saudi Arabian journalist who was assassinated by Saudi hitmen in Istanbul. And Dawn MENA has been a fierce advocate for democracy and human rights over the years. And I would hope that at the beginning, Raed, you would say a little bit about Dawn, but since you're here tonight to talk about the agreements between the United States and Saudi Arabia, I know that that's the gist of your presentation. But if you would say something about Dawn and what its aims are, I would appreciate it. Turning it over to Raed.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you everyone for inviting me to join your call. I appreciate your time and attention. As Tony mentioned, my name is Raed Jarrar. I am a Palestinian American myself. I was born in Baghdad. And I'm the first kid from my, all of my ancestors who was born outside of Jenin. They were all born in the same little village called Barqin. So I am the first one out of all of them who was born outside of Jenin, outside of Palestine. I didn't have the chance to visit Palestine until I became a US citizen. So I visited Palestine as an American, not as a Palestinian. And I went there a few times in 2015, 2016. But then in 2017, I tried to go when my father passed away, and I was denied entry for 10 years. So I haven't been back since. The Israeli authorities denied my entry to Palestine because they accused me of being a BDS supporter, which I'm not opposed to BDS, but I was never a BDS activist per se. But that's the accusation that they used to ban my entry while I worked with Amnesty International USA. I've been working with Dawn, the organization that was founded by Jamal Khashoggi, which is a generalist organization. We work generally on issues pertaining to the United States relationships with countries in the Middle East and North Africa. So we don't really focus on one country or another. As you would imagine, working on Saudi Arabia is in our DNA because our founder is Jamal Khashoggi, who was killed by agents of the Saudi government. But since our founding, 4 or 5 years ago, we mostly focused on countries and governments in the Middle East and North Africa who are strong allies with the US and who use US support to oppress their people. I think that's very important as an angle for you to remember. Like our main work here is to say, as a US organization, we see that there are so many abuses going on in the Middle East and North Africa region. But we have the most leverage and ability to change those situations that are linked to US support. Assad was a dictator who killed his people. We condemn everything that he does, but what can we do about it, really? It's not like we're sending him weapons. It's not like we're supporting him. So most of our work focused on Egypt, which is, one of the biggest recipients of US aid in the region. Every dollar that the US sends to the Sisi government supports that regime's oppression and attacks against its own people. We're focused on Israel, on Jordan, on Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. These were usually our targets. But as you would imagine, in the past year, we Assam says that he's hearing an echo. Is anyone else hearing an echo? Assam, it's just you. Sorry. So in the past year, we have been focusing more than usual on Israel-Palestine since the beginning of the genocide. Of course, we keep an eye on every other country in the region, and I'm going to talk mostly about what's going on in Saudi Arabia, but that's also connected to what's going on in Israel-Palestine. And before I switch to Saudi Arabia, Tony, I want to say that tomorrow we actually have a very huge project that we are announcing. It's a project that I have thought about for 20 years, and we have been working diligently day and night to push for it for the past year. So we're announcing it tomorrow, and I will share information with you guys maybe after the call in case you would like to attend the press conference. So the project is we are announcing a lawsuit against the US government because the US government continues to send weapons to Israel. Lawsuit is there are 5 Palestinian plaintiffs, 1 from Gaza, 1 from the West Bank, and 3 from the US, who are suing the State Department for violating the Leahy law, which is an amendment to the Foreign Assistance Act that prohibits the United States government from sending aid and support to abusive foreign units. So the lawsuit says to the State Department, obey the law, do your job, do not send more weapons to Israel. And I think it's going to be a very important lawsuit. So we're announcing that tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. EST at the National Press Club. The event is available online. We have, big speakers joining in. So I do recommend folks on the call watch that, share it with your networks in Los Angeles, send us donations. Lawsuits are very, very, very expensive, and we're a very small organization. So we need money and support.
So when you said we, what do you mean we? The families or the organization you're part of?
Yeah, so we are covering, Dawn is covering all of the expenses for the lawsuit. The 5 families are the plaintiffs, but we're covering all the expenses.
I see.
So we need a lot of money for the legal expenses, especially now, like we're, poking the bear, like they're gonna bury us in paperwork. We're gonna have tens of thousands of documents flooded on our offices. So, but anyway, I'm gonna put a link now in the chat for this. But the main reason what I want to talk about today was the impending, which seems to be fizzling away, attempts by the Saudi government, led by Mohammed bin Salman, to get what resembles a treaty, like a mutual protection treaty by the United States. This has been under wraps for a while, and we've been following it very, very closely. And I'm based in DC, so I meet with members of Congress, their staff, usually regularly. And these meetings are to lobby the US government to do something. We tell them, do this, do that, which they ignore us mostly, but also to get information. So we ask congressional staffers, what have you guys heard about this agreement between Saudi Arabia and the US? There is very small information, classified info. It's all like behind closed doors. No one says anything. Dawn organized a sizable event just a couple of months ago about the Saudi US agreement, and I will share a link here for it. So we had like a workshop and invited a bunch of big advocates for it. Now, the advocates, like we do this once or twice every year, where we hold these, dawn workshops. And the dawn workshops are usually organized under Chatham House rules. So you can read the actual information and content of what was said, but you can't really tell who said it. And that's, to create an environment where people feel more comfortable to express their opinions, flow of opinions, without someone coming after them after a year to say, aha, you predicted something wrong, So this is a link to the report that I recommend that you read it after. And the report talks about, many of the ideas that I'm discussing now. But in a nutshell, the Biden administration and Saudi Arabia, led by Mohammed bin Salman, wanted to arrange for two agreements at the same time. One agreement was a normalization agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia that would follow the same format of the other normalization agreements that were cooked by the US in the region, Bahrain, UAE, other parts of the region. And attached to this normalization agreement, the price that they're giving to Saudi Arabia would have been a US security agreement. That US security agreement had a few sections to it that, for example, the US would guarantee Saudi Arabia's security. It's a mutual defense agreement. They would actually protect Saudi Arabia in case Saudi Arabia is under attack. And that goes, it's a very high request here, like it's a very high ask. It's a very big request because it asks the US government to commit troops and resources. And the US government has hundreds of bases around the world. Most of them are kept under what the US calls a status of forces agreement, or for short, they call them SOFAs. There's more than 100 SOFAs around the world. They don't require congressional approval. They don't require anything. The US government says, it's nothing. We're just like a small executive arrangement with other countries. This one is not a SOFA. This one is a treaty. And surprisingly, unlike the other hundreds of cases where other countries just want to sign anything quick with the US, this one, Saudi Arabia, led by MBS, insisted that it becomes a treaty that is ratified by the Senate. That's a very big ask. So Mohammed bin Salman said, I would want to have this one big treaty to protect our security, send your troops here in case we're attacked by someone, Iran, someone else. Give us nuclear technology, give us this, give us that, give us this. And we want this treaty to be approved by a 2/3 majority of the Senate to make it a binding treaty that is not connected to one president or another. Now, of course, the idea behind it was they're going to introduce this treaty as a part of a bigger package of normalization. So anyone who says no to the treaty, they're going to say, you're anti-Semitic. You hate Israel. You want war. You want to destroy the, So like it becomes very, very politically impossible for members of the Senate to vote against a treaty with Saudi Arabia if that is attached to some sort of this big, announcement about like a normalization deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Biden was pushing for that very, very strongly. Of course, after October 7th, the world changed, and it became much harder for Mohammed bin Salman to sign a normalization agreement. He would love to have a normalization agreement, but it became much harder to sign a normalization agreement because every morning we wake up and there are videos of dead Palestinian babies that were bombed last night by Israel. And it's very difficult for Mohammed bin Salman to say, look at this amazing peace achievement that I have with this genocidal maniac who's killing civilians every day. So it becomes very difficult for him becomes unattainable to push for, like a treaty. Mohammed bin Salman doesn't say no. He's not a principled person. I actually got information, indirect information, from someone who was in the room with Mohammed bin Salman and a delegation of senators that visited Saudi Arabia a couple of months ago. That person says that Mohammed bin Salman was talking to the bipartisan delegation of US senators, and he said, he talked about the situation with the treaty and the situation with the normalization. And he didn't say, you guys, I want you to push for a ceasefire, because without a ceasefire, there will not be a normalization. He didn't say that. So he didn't use his leverage to push the United States to, assert its points of leverage and make Israel agree to a ceasefire agreement. He didn't do that. He actually did it the other way around. So he told the US senators, he said, listen, I can actually get a normalization agreement with Israel, even with the genocide going. But I feel personally, unsafe, because when other people did this, like Sadat in Egypt, or King Abdullah of Jordan, like the grandfather of this King Abdullah, they were killed. So this is an issue of personal safety to me. If you want me to do it, you have to give me more and more and more guarantees, more and more and more rewards for me to accept this. So he used it upside down. So instead of using his leverage to call for a ceasefire, he actually used the genocide to ask for a higher price for the agreement. So the reading from that meeting was concerning, which is Saudi Arabia is not saying no to the normalization. They actually can and will go through with it. They're just waiting for the right moment. They're waiting for the right price. Now, of course, on the US side, the idea of submitting the security agreement without normalization is dead on arrival. That's not going to happen, because there is no way 2/3 majority of the Senate will say, yeah, of course, let's commit our troops and give Saudi Arabia nuclear power. And for what? Like, no one will say this. And they will not say it for a variety of reasons. Some of it is legitimate criticism of Mohammed bin Salman's history and record of human rights abuses. Some of it is just Islamophobia and anti-Muslim sentiment that goes around in the Senate. But all of these things will be suppressed, of course, if there is someone from AIPAC calling every one of these senators and saying, you have to approve this. And AIPAC is not going to move on this without like a grand normalization agreement. So that's where we're stuck. Now, I don't think it's impossible to have both of these agreements happen during the Biden administration. It might actually still happen because Mohammed bin Salman has absolutely no backbone. He's not objecting to any of this. So he might agree to it. They also might wait until there is a ceasefire announcement, which many people think is impending around the time that Biden leaves office and Trump comes into office. There will be some sort of a ceasefire agreement, and that will open the door for Mohammed bin Salman to announce this grand normalization agreement with Israel, which will, Trump will love. Trump gave Mohammed bin Salman $2 billion as like, parting gift. Last time Trump left office, Mohammed bin Salman gave him $2 billion to invest in his company with Jared Kushner. So obviously Mohammed bin Salman has a lot of leverage, a lot of relationships. He was betting on Trump to come back. So maybe he's just going to wait until the day after Trump comes back into office to announce the normalization agreement. So I think it's very, very highly probable that there will be an announcement about a normalization agreement between Saudi Arabia and the US next year. And that will include both the treaty and it will include, some sort of a ground bargain between Saudi Arabia and Israel. We don't know the exact details yet, but we know that, there are definitely things that are still in motion. Tony, let me stop here. I talked a lot, I feel. It's 10:30 my time. So my brain is starting to lose focus here on politics. But I do want to hear from you guys if you have any questions or you want to engage me.
So can I ask what's going to happen to the Palestinians?
I mean, the short answer is, Saudi Arabia, MBS, and Netanyahu and Trump, they don't care. The idea behind the normalization is to put the Palestinian issue on the backseat. That's the idea. They don't care.
So they'll just give the Golan Heights and give the West Bank to Israel?
I mean, it's going to get very bad under the next administration. And I think the Golan Heights has already been given to Israel by the Trump administration. There is literally like a sign there for like a settlement or something that they named it the Trump Heights.
Trump Heights, yeah. So what about Gaza?
But with the West Bank also, that's also like impending, like an annexation of the West Bank is also impending. All of these things are a part of this bigger plan to erase of anything Palestinian. And the idea was to, put Palestine and Palestinians on the back burner and make like peace. We have peace with Arabs with Israel, but does not include anything that has to do with Palestinians, like what UAE did, what Bahrain did.
And the Israelis will just take back Gaza?
I mean, I don't think they can. If they could, they would, but they physically could not. Like, I think what we saw so far is they have control over the northern neighborhoods of Gaza that they ethnically cleansed. I don't know how far they're going to go, especially that Palestinians are not leaving Gaza. But I would say the situation overall is trending like in a bad direction. And a treaty between Saudi Arabia and the US and the normalization agreement between the tyrant of Saudi Arabia and the tyrant of Israel will not be good news for anyone in the region.
So that they think the population of Saudi Arabia won't rise up against MBS because of this? You said he was afraid he was going to be assassinated.
I mean, the population will not rise up, but you never know whether there is one person who's going to, do something. Like, people in Saudi Arabia are mostly under daily brainwashing with state media about how Palestinians are awful, and the Saudi Arabia's main channel in the Arab world called Al Arabiya is literally worse than Israeli channels since the beginning of the genocide. They're actually worse than the Israeli channels. Like, the anti-Palestinian, pro-Israeli sentiment that Al Arabiya has is actually worse than Israeli channels. It's unbelievable. So I don't think there'll be like a popular uprising against him, but there are some like pockets of criticism to his policies. But he's a dictator. He has destroyed any space of opposition or dissent in the country. So I doubt that there will be a price that he's going to pay domestically.
So Palestinian civilization will basically cease to exist?
I mean, that's their plan, but as Palestinians have said from my grandfather's generation, existence is resistance. Just the fact that they're there by itself amounts to something.
I have a point of order. It's look like that 4 people waiting in line to ask questions. So I think it will be fair if anybody want to ask question to raise their hands.
Right.
With all due respect, Dorothy. So
I'm sorry, I didn't even notice. I'm so sorry.
yeah, okay.
Yossi, thank you. I was going to say, if you want to make a comment, raise your hand. I had one question for you, and then Ori, Gideon, and Jeff Warner have questions to come. Over the weekend, there was a meeting of Arab countries, including Saudi Arabia. What was, regarding the situation in Syria, what was your take on that information that has come from that meeting?
There isn't really that much to comment on. And the fact that the Assad government fell very quickly was surprising to everyone. No one really expected it. Not Assad himself, not the opposition, not Israel. No one really expected it. And but it seems like the uprising and the armed opposition I think they're being coached and like curbed by Turkey. So they're not crazy. We haven't seen big reprisal attacks against Alawites, Shia. Like we haven't seen like any crazy pictures or videos show up there. We haven't seen any crazy announcements come up on TV. So they're being like controlled by someone who knows how to run a country, So they reached out to Iran, they reached out to Iraq, they reached out to Lebanon, they reached out to all of the other countries and gave them assurances. We're not crazy. We're actual statesmen here who are trying to create a new country. Seems like everyone is not freaked out about it, like it landed. The only ones who are freaked out about them are Israel. Israel has been bombing Syria every day. Actually, in one day, they bombed Syria 500 times, which was the biggest operation in the history of the Israeli military since it was created. Destroyed all of Syria's air force, all of Syria's sea force, all of Syria's air defenses, the vast majority of Syria's missile systems. They're scared because Assad, who took pride in being a part of the, axis of resistance and killed hundreds of thousands of his people and tortured them and raped them because he was the one who would liberate Palestine. He didn't fire a bullet on Israel. And now that he's gone, Israel is actually worried. It shows you like how he was actually like he's like got their back, like they were not worried before when he was in power, but now they're worried about having. So I would say like the general mood is that no one is alarmed about the new Syrian government. It's not like people are feeling that they have to like deal with some Taliban coming to power, like what happened in Afghanistan. They seem to be like technocrats, fine with like main, democracy outlines. So people are not freaked out about it. So like that's the general feeling, like no one loves them, but no one hates them. Like they're just like somewhere in there. So that's what I like read from that meeting.
Yeah. Ori, you have a question?
Couple of things. First of all, thank you very much for that perspective. The first thing that kind of came up to me is you said about democracy in the Arab countries. This is, a subject that I've been reading for, I don't know, forever, and I never met anybody who says that it's going to happen. So this is kind of like, if you want to comment it. But the main question I have is, does MBS have any real opposition inside or outside Saudi Arabia to his rule? In other words, if he says, yes, we're going to do the deal with Israel, is it a real threat to him from somebody outside or inside to be toppled? Or this is just a tactic of negotiation to get a higher price for whatever the Americans want from him? So
Definitely.
like the Middle East you start always with the maximum. That's the negotiation.
Exactly. It's like haggling at the bazaar,
Absolutely. They call it the Turkish bazaar. I don't know why Turkish, but
it's a Saudi bazaar.
okay.
Yeah, it's definitely there is no opposition. There was maybe like some seeds of opposition inside Saudi Arabia. Mohammed bin Salman destroyed it completely. He rounded everyone up like very early on, put them in jails, hotels. He has he's running the country like as a dictator with an iron fist. That's why Trump likes him. Like imagine like one story that I tell just to describe the level of corruption and dictatorship in Saudi Arabia is that Mohammed bin Salman was not happy with his control over the judicial system. So he created his own court. It's called the Specialized Court of Terrorism. It's his court. And he appointed a judge to the Specialized Court of Terrorism. So this court, like, someone tweets about Mohammed bin Salman, they bring him to the Mohammed bin Salman court, the Specialized Court, an anti-terrorism court. And they give that guy 10 years in prison. This one, makes a joke about Mohammed bin Salman. They catch him, bring him to the court, they put him there. So after a few months, Mohammed bin Salman this is a true story, I'm not making this up. He was actually underwhelmed by the sentences that the judge was giving to these individuals. So he took the judge and put the judge in jail. And then he appointed his personal friend who has no law degree, not even an attorney. He put him as the judge of the kangaroo court. So this new guy comes in and he starts giving people execution, like death penalties. You tweeted death, you joked death. So that's how he's running the country. It's unbelievable. It's like a banana republic, like a TV show, if people were not dying because of this, it's actually very funny. It's a comedy. But he destroyed the opposition completely. And there are some like small pockets of opposition outside the country, including here in the United States. One of my former colleagues at Dawn, his name is Abdullah Al-Ouda. His father, Sheikh Salman Al-Ouda, is one of the highest profile political prisoners in Saudi Arabia. He's like 14, 15 million followers on his Twitter account. He's been imprisoned there because when Mohammed bin Salman blockaded Qatar, he put a statement saying, we shouldn't do these kind of things with our neighboring countries. We should have some sort of a immediate reconciliation. So they put him in jail since, and they haven't let him out. So his son Abdullah lives in DC here, and he has like a group, Saudis from around the world, who have a coalition of opposition, but they're very limited. They don't really have that much presence on the ground. The short answer to your question, Yuri, is that does he have a position in the country? No. Is he going to be able to sign an agreement with Israel? Yes.
It's up to him, basically. He decides when and what and how to do it. If he wants to accept an offer, what kind of an offer? And he can actually cut a deal with Trump between the two of them, and the whole thing is going to fly.
That's right.
If he drops,
I am 100% sure.
For treaty.
100% sure that Trump already reached out to him and said, "Hold off, don't deliver that big, present until I'm in office, because I want to take credit for it." So, but yeah, definitely that's a part of this. Him and Trump will be like, best buddies. So he's gonna give him that.
Okay. Gideon. Gideon, you have your hand raised.
Yes. I have a comment and a question. So the comment is, I don't believe in the Arab state any of the leaders are in love with Palestinian or the Palestinian cause. So anybody that can sign agreement with the US and get something for this will sell the Palestinian in a heartbeat. So I'm not surprised that that's happened, unfortunately. And the question I got for you, why do we care if there is agreement with Saudi Arabia and Israel? I mean, everybody understands that this is against the Iranians. So as Israeli and American, I'm not, I myself not get excited about it or upset about it. It's another agreement that maybe will do some good, maybe will do some bad, but I don't see it as something that will change the situation in Israel in the sense that the occupation will continue and you know the war. Israel is now trying to put settlement in Gaza, so that will not change if there is agreement with Bin Salman or there is not agreement. So what you thought about it? Why should we care about it?
Listen, I think that's something that I have said over the past year or two. If Saudi Arabia wants to sign an agreement with Israel, as we say in Arabic, ahlan wa sahlan, you do it. Like, of course, as an observer, I would say this is not a good agreement because it is uniting evil and dictatorships and apartheid regimes, genocidal regimes, dictatorships together to solidify their control over the region. But the answer to your question is this. This is not a bilateral agreement between two countries that we're just watching. And we're thinking, well, should we care about this agreement between Ethiopia and Somalia? It's good, maybe it's bad. Well, this is different because this is an agreement that is being signed with our money. The US is committing billions of dollars of resources and troops and technology and weapons and future blood and treasure to go fight against whomever is bombing Saudi Arabia. For what? Why would we? Why is it in the United States' interest to go provide these guarantees and give all of these carrots and guarantees and gifts so that someone would sign an agreement with Israel? What is it for us? It's nothing for us. I agree with you. The reason why it's not a legitimate reasoning to say let's go commit billions of our treasure and thousands of our troops is that we shouldn't actually care. So I agree with you. I don't care if they want to do it by themselves. Let them do it. Mohammed bin Salman is a dictator, and maybe that will create some sort of like correction in the country, and people bring him down. I don't care that much, but the only part that we do care about is that this agreement is getting sponsored and paid for by our tax dollars.
Right. Jeff?
Thank you, Raed. I was sort of surprised that you're so optimistic that this treaty will get through Congress. It's
I
not.
mean, that's me being pessimistic. That's bad news. I'm not optimistic.
Okay, you're predicting it will, and and my feeling all along has been it's not that the defense commitment with billions of dollars will hold it back, but what will hold it back is the nuclear proliferation. And with all of the anti-nuke talk, I just find it difficult to see that getting through. And you pointed out that this treaty is going to insist on a 2/3 or 3/4, a supermajority.
It's Article 2 of the US Constitution. You need any international treaty to be ratified with a 2/3 majority by the Senate.
Anyway, so I guess I'd ask you to talk a little bit more about the play of politics that's going to allow or motivate Congress to actually pass especially the nuclear proliferation part.
I'll tell you, like everything that you said now is 100% right. And I think this agreement it's impossible for it to pass because as I said, like it doesn't make any sense. Like it's expensive and people don't like Saudi Arabia in general for their abuses or because they hate Muslims and they're Islamophobic. It doesn't make sense. And this treaty is a joke. If it wasn't for the 5-letter magic that will be sprinkled on it, AIPAC. AIPAC is going to whip this, and that's the only problem. With no AIPAC, there will be no agreement. But imagine all of these Republicans who are going to hear from their AIPAC contacts. This is an agreement that is essential for the existence of the State of Israel. It's an agreement that is essential for the defense of the Jewish people who live in the middle of that scary neighborhood. It's an agreement that if you vote against, you are voting to have another October 7th against the State of Israel. How can anyone vote against it? People will freak out. Be like, just do whatever. Like, I don't want to be messing with the lobby here in DC. So that's the thing, is Biden, if they can pass the agreement without AIPAC, they would have presented it months ago. They can't. The only reason why the agreement is waiting is that they're waiting for a normalization deal. And the normalization deal, which is not in the agreement, will be the actual engine that would get it through DC. So when you think about it the way that you're talking about it, Jeff, I agree with you 100%. This agreement doesn't make any sense. It's not in the US interest. And thinking about, politics in the Senate, if you look at it, anyone would say it's impossible for a two-thirds majority of the US Senate to vote for this crop. There's no way it's going to happen, except when you put AIPAC on it. Once AIPAC is on it, it's going to pass.
Yossi,
Actually, the vote 2 weeks ago on the Bernie Sanders
JRD.
limiting weapons showed that there's something like 20% of the Senate that's ready to vote no. And then you take anti-nuclear people,
That's right.
getting to a third is going to be tough. Anyway, I believe
right.
you. That's why we have you here.
Listen,
Yossi.
it's not exact science, but here's the thing: like the JRDs were not whipped by Israel by AIPAC, because this is a symbolic vote. There were a few of the joint resolutions of disapproval that Senator Sanders introduced. Most of them got 17 votes. A couple of them got 18. One got 19. And these 19, one of the 19 is actually had just resigned, Senator Helmi. He's replaced. So out of those 18 votes, I would say we have a solid 12. Solid 12 who will vote against what AIPAC says. These are like the core of the Senate that actually can stand up to AIPAC. The other 6, I think they're if AIPAC tells them, especially if they're like very close, if they're getting like 65 votes, and one of those 6 is voting yes or no, they're going to crush them and they're going to get their vote. So if the votes are whipped, it's very different than it just being a symbolic, like you want to have a symbolic vote, fine, go suit yourself and get 17, 18 votes to oppose an arms sale to Israel. Like, it ain't gonna happen, But once it comes to the other way around, where they actually have very small numbers, it becomes very difficult. I think the other dynamic that also plays into that, Jeff, to strengthen your point, is that now Democrats are more lenient when it comes to supporting an agreement, because Biden is in power. But when there is a Republican in the White House, Democrats usually wake up the next morning and remember human rights, like, oh my God, Mohammed bin Salman is awful. They're going to remember that. So that's also, like, to your point, that is also like ways in like the favor of your assessment that this is not going to pass the Senate very easily. It's going to be a close call, but it's not impossible. I think more likely than not that the power of the Israel lobby added to the power of the Saudi Arabia lobby, where they have spent hundreds of millions of dollars, building their lobby machine in DC, that it's going to pay off.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, in the interest of Raed getting a good night's sleep, we'll take the last question from Yossi, and then we'll say good night.
I just want my original question was about Syria, but after I heard Gideon comment about why we care, I think this is a very, very interesting questions. why I want to make a comment about this, because this is Netanyahu doctrine. Netanyahu spoke to his opponents in Israel, who's saying that because of you, we're never going to have a peace with the Arab world because you don't want to fix the Palestinian issue. And he said, no, 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 no. I believe I can make a peace with the rest of the Arab world bypassing the Palestinians. And this is where he started what they call the Abraham Accord in 2019. And the United States was willing to cooperate with him under Trump. But if you can imagine that Ben Salman and the rest of the Gulf Arab countries still insisting that the road to relationship with them going through a Palestinian state, and they're making this point to the United States, it's just another pressure on the US to maybe reconsider, maybe not, but doing the deal with the Israeli government, or I can say Netanyahu government, is basically following Netanyahu doctrine, that he's saying again, I can make a peace with the rest of the Arab world, and I can bypass the Palestinians, and I'll prove you that I'm right. And he's pushing for this very hard through AIPAC, through whatever, and it may be happen, it may be not. I'm not 100% convinced that Ben Salman will go for this, because why he didn't do it under Biden? Why suddenly under Trump? Maybe Trump will give him some extra business, or who knows what? I don't know, you know. But the reason is that this agreement is basically to bury the Palestinian issue forever. This is the idea. But it will not be buried forever, because October 7, one of the outrageous event that they're saying we are not going away. And who knows if after this agreement, we're not going to face another similar October 7, because after all, these people, after 57 years of occupation, and when they saw that there is nothing for them, no political process, no peace agreement, no else, they can maybe do another extreme action because of desperations. And then what? And how the world will react to this? Because they're not going away.
I think you're too optimistic, Yossi. I don't think anything will happen
Wait.
after 7/11.
It's
7/10.
You know, in history it shows that all kind of things happening that people couldn't accept. You don't know. We don't know what's going to happen.
That's right. I mean, we just saw what happened in Syria.
Nobody predicted the first intifada, second intifada, October 7, Trump winning the election. This was not that Soviet Union will collapse. All kind of things happen in history. You know, if you say a month ago that Assad regime will collapse, you think you're dreaming.
That's right.
So things, even in the Middle East, can happen that maybe one day wake up and heard that the Saudi Arabia regime collapse. I don't know. It might happen. Maybe not. Maybe I'm a dreamer, but there is nothing.
Yeah, you can dream, but that's not an action plan. So
no, but here's the thing. Like, I don't think.
You know, let Raed answer your comments.
I think it's a dream that to imagine that any empire or government or country will last forever. Like it is realistic to say all of these regimes come to an end, whether they are, you know, South Africa, whether they are the Roman Empire, you know, whether they are the Soviet Union, they will come to an end. I think the question is how and when. You know, as I said earlier, as Yossi just said, who would imagine that Assad will fall just in like a week? It's completely unpredictable. Who would have imagined that South Africa, that very strong, brutal regime, supported by the US and looked is going to last forever? Poof! It also fell at one point. So I mean, I don't have doubt that these like dictator regimes that we view like genocidal, apartheid regimes, they're unsustainable. Like that's the first thing that comes to mind when I visited Palestine the first time in my life, and I saw how Palestinians were living on one side of the wall and had to like use these other roads, and it doesn't look sustainable. It's just like this. There's no way this is going to last for thousands of years. There's no way. There's no way that you can sustain this level of injustice for this long. So I mean, I agree. Like you sign an agreement, you don't sign an agreement, you can pull it off, and you're like, but how long can you maintain a system of injustice? I say not that long.
And I just think Yossi commented on my question. I'm just saying what's happened in Israel, Palestine is nothing to do with the agreement we'll sign with Ben Salman. That's what I'm saying.
But
If the apartheid will collapse, it will not collapse because or not of Ben Salman. That's what my point was. That's why I said I don't care.
There isn't like a one silver bullet that will lead to anything, but it's connected. It's very highly connected. Like the reason why the agreement is getting signed is, the situation with Israel. The reason why they're pushing for it is their relationship with Israel. It's connected. Like Israel, the Netanyahu government is trying to legitimize its existence by having these kind of relationships with other dictators in the region. And then they can say, listen, like we have actually excellent relationships with the Arabs, and these, a couple million, troublemakers who live in Gaza, don't think about them, like think about the other, hundreds of millions of Arabs that we have good relationship with their governments. So it is definitely not, these are not agreements meant to create like prosperity and peace. They are agreements that are meant to create a pretext for erasure of Palestinian history and existence.
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. Will Palestinians cease to exist? No.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
Palestinians,
That's
they
a
have a
question.
very
We should,
developed,
I will come back
civilization.
to your meeting next year, and we can see if we cease to exist or not.
Yeah. As the saying goes, existence is resistance.
That's right.
Yes.
Well, it's definitely my bedtime, Tony, so I appreciate
I know
you.
it is. Jeff has his hand up. Before everybody goes, look in the chat box. Raed has put up the link
That's
to
right.
the press conference tomorrow morning
That's right.
announcing the lawsuit. So if you want to attend that via Zoom, please check into that. https://bit.ly/Leahy, Leahy, with a capital L, RSVP.
What time is in the morning? Just so we'll understand.
12:30 my time, 9:30 your time.
Okay, excellent, very good. Thank you.
Yeah, it will be a good press conference. We have a few good speakers there, including the plaintiffs and a couple of my colleagues who have been all over the media lately. Josh Paul, who resigned from the State Department, Cobb Laha. We have actually Senator Leahy's main advisor for 35 years, Tim Reeser. Many people, including myself, credit him for even having the Leahy law. He's going to be one of our speakers as well. So very big deal.
Very good.
That's excellent.
Thank you.
Because it needs to be.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Raed, very much. Jeff, did you have something to say?
Yeah, first of all, 1:30 in Washington is 10:30 here.
12:30.
Oh, 12:30 in Washington.
Yeah, 12:30 in Washington. It's 9:30, right?
Yeah. Okay. And so in the email that I'll send out within a couple of hours, that'll have the links to the recording, I will put in a link to the Dawn, where you can contribute to Dawn if you think that Dawn is helping the world
Yes.
move forward and has
Please send us your monies.
and we thank Raed, and we're going to send him an honorarium. We give him normally an honorarium each time, and I'll be in email contact on how.
Thank you. That's very generous of you. I have spoken in thousands of these events, and no one has paid me honorarium, so I appreciate.
Well, we're special. Yeah, I know. Anyway, and I just want to bring up, before I sign off, Dorothy's point about what is this, the implications of all this for the Palestinians is really very concerning. It's way more concerning than in my mind, the nuclear proliferation or defense agreements or anything like that.
100%
Thank you, Jeff.
100% agree.
And with that, I guess, thank you for coming finally, Dick. But we're signing off now.
Bye,
Thank you,
Raed.
everyone. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Jeff,
Talk to you
Thank
soon.
you.
Bye-bye.
Jeff,
Yeah.
Thank you all.
hey, look, before everybody go, I wonder, I have a question to everybody. Are you interested for the next half an hour to have a little bit discussion about Syria, like open discussion, or everybody want to go home? Well, you are at home. To go and watch the news, or maybe because I have my thought about, especially what with Netanyahu motivations of bombing Syria and why he's doing it. You know, so if
Yeah, but
it's
we've,
okay with everybody, or we just say goodbye.
It's
I'll
okay.
stick around if
And we
anybody
have
else wants to.
Like another half an hour.
can stick
it's
around
okay.
for about another 20 minutes or so.
And we have Samir here, who's a Syrian expert.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm going to actually ask, since you brought this up, Yossi, I'm going to ask you to start open
Okay,
this.
I just want to take the aspect Netanyahu doctrine, okay? Because this doctrine is all over the place in the Middle East. What I said before, that he want to do bypass the Palestinians, and now it just remembers that Netanyahu was doing all his effort before October 7, that the money will fly to
Excuse me.
Hamas, you know.
I am going to, just a second, before you go on, Yossi, I think it's appropriate to end the recording at this stage.
Okay.
So let me end the recording, and then you can go on.
Okay.